my Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto.
Welcome to episode 1722 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Toronto's waterfront BIA. More than water. Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. Get your butts to Christie Pitts this summer for the best baseball in the city outside the dome. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management, Inc. and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic'd debut is Order of Canada recipient and World Snooker Championship winner, Cliff Thorburn. Welcome, Cliff.
Mike, how you doing?
What a pleasure it is to meet you. I want to shout somebody out right off the top, somebody who introduced us. Let's give some love to Gary Chowan. How do you know Gary?
Well, Gary used to cut my hair for the longest time, and
but no more, Cliff? What's going on?
Well, although I've got a lot of hair, luckily, as some say, I was hanging around downtown, and Gary was the man, so to speak, and then I moved to England, and for 8 or 10 years, spent a lot of time over there. Got a different barber. Came back, and somebody was doing perms for me up in Markham. And the next thing you know, I wasn't seeing Gary as much, and he just wasn't as handy as what he was before. But very, very handy in the sense that I love talking to him, and he's got some great stories, and we've been friends for the longest time.
Gary is a tremendous storyteller. That's how he got his way on Toronto Mic'd. He can tell a good story, be it about Cher, you name it. He's got like wild stories, Ed McMahon. But then he told me, he said, Mike, Cliff walks amongst us. Cliff Thorburn do you live in Toronto or is it the GTA?
I live very close to Markham. I'm in Scarborough now. I never thought that I'd actually live in Scarborough after living in Markham for so many years. Of 25 or 30 years out of the last 40, I've lived in Markham, and we just moved to Scarborough for a few different reasons. But
but now you're in the six, as they say. You're now in the six proper.
I hear that. I don't understand that. I mean, the first time I heard it was Drake mentioned it, and also that there's a basketball team that's named after it.
Well, let me help you out. So there's a couple of origins, but the main one is there's 6 boroughs in Toronto. So you're in Scarborough. Right now we're recording in Etobicoke. There's 6 of those. I can even name them. But that also the 2 primary area codes, although we've added a few since then, but it was 416 and 647. So the 6 linked them. So this is the 6.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now I know that. That's
now you know the
Thanks.
origin, the 6. Okay.
No,
so
it's great.
Thank you, Gary, for putting us in touch. But Gary said you got to talk to Cliff. And I'm like, I actually was thinking, okay, Mike, you don't know anything about snooker. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Snooker. Am I saying that right?
You say it right to me. In the States, in the UK, they call it snooker. And I never seemed to say it right in their eyes, but it didn't matter just as long as you could play it. But snooker is the way that I like to hear it and say it.
If I can say it the same way Cliff Thorburn says it, then I feel I'm in good company.
Well, you're headed in the right direction.
I'm going to burn off a few notes that came in when I announced you were coming on, and then we're going to kind of go back and we're going to have a great chat. I hope I hope Gary warned you. You're here for at least an hour. Is that okay?
That's fine, of course. Yes.
Okay, good. I hope he gave you the heads up here. And by the way, I feel like if you wanted to crack open your Great Lakes beer right now, you have a premium lager in front of you. this one right here, fresh from the fridge. But if you do crack it open, do it on the mic so we can hear it. Do you want to do it?
Well, some people call this, my friends call this the Canadian national anthem.
Okay, on the mic.
Okay.
Okay, beautiful. I'm doing it.
Okay.
All right, so cheers to you, Cliff. Good to meet you, man.
Thank you very much, Mike. Cheers.
I told you you were the, Order of Canada. That's a prestigious company you're in, but you are the second Order of Canada recipient to sit there in the past 2 days because Donovan Bailey was by yesterday. But I'm telling you, I know I'm in the presence of a legend here. So let me just shout out some notes from listeners. Steve Cole, when I announced you were coming on, said, Cliff Thorburn, that's a coup. He's a legend from my younger years. You're a legend, Cliff.
Well, I've been around for a long time. I started playing when I was about 15 and in Victoria, BC, and I found snooker to be very, very, very frustrating. I broke quite a few cues when I was young. Although I played baseball and lacrosse, and I was quite good at both of them, but individual sports I sort of gravitated towards them. But just the first time I saw the game played in Victoria, and there was I went to watch my father bowl at Gibson's Bowling Alley, and not that I was bored with bowling, but I heard a clicking noise, went downstairs, watched a fella bank the black ball into the side pocket, and a groan went up, and some money appeared on the table, and one fellow was laughing and grabbed the money, and then somebody spotted me and said, "Okay, kid, out of here," and back up the stairs I went. I was 12 at that time, and but that's the first time I saw it, and I ran upstairs to my father, and I was just completely out of breath. And Dad, I was downstairs with the shade and the frills, and there was the colored balls, the bright green cloth, and the colored balls, and it was unbelievable, and the money, and he said the 4 words which really sort of changed my life. He said, "Don't go down there."
Oh,
you know what
rebel.
happens. So, okay, no problem. Next day, almost, but I fell in love with the game, and then the Hustler came out, and I didn't actually watch the Hustler then, but I just saw the trailers for it and the posters and so on, and I was hooked, and ever since then I wake up every day knowing that I still love snooker and will always love it.
well, I'm going to follow up on a couple of things there, and then I'll get back to all the notes I got. So many notes. Like, what a big deal. I'm so honored to have you here. But you mentioned you played lacrosse. Now, I understand that you set a one-game scoring record of 10 goals in the Greater Victoria Minor Lacrosse Association Midget Division in 1958. So you didn't just play lacrosse, but it sounds like you were a hell of a lacrosse player.
Well, I wasn't bad. I was, I've always had good hands, but that particular day, I was quite bored with lacrosse, and I said to my father, Jim, I said, I don't want to go today. And he said, well, you've got to go play lacrosse, because he loved it too. I was successful at it, and anyway, so we're driving there, and he came to a stop sign, and I got out and I just took off. I said, Dad, I don't want to play. And so anyways, he caught me, and he put me back in the car, and then I climbed up a tree, the next one, and then he put me back in the car, and then I played the game, and it was almost like I wanted to show him that I didn't want to go, and I ended up scoring 10 goals.
10 goals.
But I was pretty nifty at that time. 10 goals was a lot, but just faking with the lacrosse stick and everything, and then they actually put me. It's a long story, but I ended up being the goalkeeper. Like the next year, they wouldn't let me play on my team. It's right, all politics. Anyway,
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and I even scored a couple of goals as the goal.
Wow.
Yeah, but like just being a pest, and getting lots of assists and all that stuff. But I love lacrosse and still love it to this day. I'm just a big fan of it.
But I understand by the age of 16, you've left school and you're traveling across this country, basically making money as a snooker player.
Well, I didn't make a lot of money, but it was, I wanted to, I thought that every pool room or every city had a pool room like the Rack and Q in Victoria, and that's where all the champions played in Victoria. And I just wanted to see different players. I could see that everybody had a different style, and everybody had a story, and it was just phenomenal. And I could meet them all. I could sit there and watch them. I could ask them questions. Didn't get a lot of answers in those days. There weren't any videos or anything like that. So you almost had to learn it just through time spent. But traveling was easy, except of course in the wintertime, if you were in Winnipeg, Manitoba, of course, in January. And actually, a friend of mine and myself, we caught a freight train, and it was in the winter. We ended up being in the second engine, and we wanted to see the late great George Chenier, who was the only other at the moment snooker player in the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame.
Wow. And
anyways, I wanted to see George play, so we were in the second engine for about 2.5 days, and I think we had a Christmas cake or something between us. We were like out of our minds completely. I mean, 16, 17 years old, but the only way to travel, and ended up getting to Toronto, and via Montreal actually, but because there weren't any train schedules there in the second engine.
You know what they say, you can't jump a jet plane like you can a freight train.
No, well, exactly. And, what happens is, of course, you don't realize it when you've been on a train for 2.5 days, and that's even being a passenger, you don't realize just how fast the train is going when it actually slows down. And so we jumped off the train, and it was going quite fast, and I went for a tumble.
You'll kill yourself doing that.
Yeah, well, you could have. And anyways, in Toronto, I got to see George Chenier play, and I heard all these stories about George never missing a ball, etc. And the first shot he played, well, he missed the shot. And, of course, I realized that I had he's not that good, so to speak. But then I saw George actually run the rest of the table, and he just did it in such a way that he just had easy shots, and he didn't have to hit the ball hard, and it was really beautiful, nice tempo, every shot the same speed, and just had this look of the ball actually being in before he shot it. I mean, that was it's still beautiful to watch.
All right, you said the word tempo, so before I bring you back to 1968, I did get a question from Tyler Campbell. And he was asking if you ever did a Ford commercial back in the 1980s. He's got a memory of you doing a commercial for Ford. Did you do that?
No, not.
So he's got the wrong guy. Come on, Tyler.
Yeah.
He's like, I couldn't find it anywhere. Well, there's a reason you can't find it anywhere, Tyler. This never happened. Correct yourself.
I did a commercial with Paul Rimstead. We were at the McLaughlin estate out in Oshawa. And it was, I was massaging a shot around actually I had a shot, and then in the script, Paul put a beer bottle on, and then I played a massage shot around the beer bottle and made it. And then, it was, it went over quite well, actually.
Okay, so I'm bringing you back to 1968, because in 1968, you won the Toronto, what did you win? The Toronto Snooker Championship? What was that called?
It was.
Oh, the Toronto City Championship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in 1968, yeah, I guess it was, yeah. And that was about the first real tournament that I had won of any significance.
So you're just a natural then. Like, I'm just trying to build you up here. Of course, you'll become world champion, but you were just a natural. This kid from Victoria, BC. You just had the natural snooker skills.
I had the natural desire. As far as the snooker skills, I was just mainly self-taught, and I was more of a copycat. And eventually found my way. But I mean, I'm typically I am the fellow that. Played for 6 or 7 hours a day for 15 years to become an overnight sensation. And that 10,000 thing was probably 15,000 hours. But
you put in your reps.
Mm-hmm. yeah. And but it wasn't. There weren't any coaches. I just worked on things that shots that were giving me trouble, and I just realized that I wanted to be good when I got in the balls, because you can be the best safety player in the world, and somebody leaves you in the balls. Well, you want to be able to clear the table or close to it. And that's what I worked on.
You worked on that, but Cliff, you're Canadian. FYI, you're Canadian. So this is. Like, to me, this is like somebody in the UK trying to make it in the NHL. Like, it's like, did you have any sense of like all the greats are coming out of the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I did. Of course, I worshipped them from afar. The best players, and some of them became my friends. But I still, after a while, I felt like the Russian hockey player. He was. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and it's just it's something that you have to get by. But I mean, I met so many people over there, but I was the bad guy for a while. I mean, I didn't have to tattoo a maple leaf on my forehead, because they all knew where I came from. And
they heard how you said snooker, and they said, "Oh, this guy's Canadian."
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I think the strangeness of it was, and the only thing that sort of comes close was when I was much younger, and the Olympics. I guess that it was in Tokyo, and a fellow named Doug Rogers became. He was the runner-up in the World Judo Championship. And so that was really strange, as somebody coming from Canada and doing well at the Olympics. So something like that. But I had to relearn the game when I went to the UK, because the tables were the pockets were tighter, the cloth was thicker, the balls were always damp, the balls were heavier. At the time, I didn't realize that here in Canada that we probably had the best conditions playing anywhere in the world. We just assumed that that in the UK that things were absolutely perfect. Like a friend and I would be saying, "Well, Cliff, I wonder what it's like going over to the UK." So we sort of thought that before I went there, that it would be like the guy in the Beefeater,
right?
Costume with the big staff and going, And he pound the ground, boom, boom, introducing from Canada, Cliff Thorburn, like that, and then pounding it with a scepter, kind of a thing. So, but once we got there, or once I got there, the white clubs, for the referees, and just all very, very polished, and tuxedos, and the people that were. That watched, they all wore ties, and, it's gotten to be like a lot more relaxed now, obviously, but, it was very, very staid kind of a thing, all, the Marcus of Queenberry rules and all that stuff.
You're blowing my mind. I had no idea that the conditions, like you described there with the fabric and the balls and being heavier, and all that, I had no idea the conditions would be any different, whether you're playing in Toronto or playing in London.
Yeah, if you're, if somebody leaves a door open and it's raining outside, then the balls actually collect some of the moisture, and then when the ball hits the cushion, it sort of jumps up, and then say the cue ball, after it hits the object ball, will hit a cushion and will actually just have a small little bounce coming off the cushion. So the ball will probably travel another 2 or 3 feet more than what you're thinking. It just looks like a terrible shot. But there's guys that we would say to them, we're not going to play tonight, or else the guy's are talking smart to you, that doesn't play well when it's damp, and he says something to you, and then you say, what are you laughing about? It's raining outside. And stuff like that. But there's a lot to it. You can, I've got so many demons with the game of snooker that I've, missed or made anything that you can think of. I've probably done, and not, good or bad playing.
Okay. Now you become champion of the world in 1980. So we're gonna take us there. But on our way, we kind of skipped over, but. Right out of the gate, you had a very interesting life. I mean, I was reading about how you were living in an orphanage for a period of time before being raised by your dad, and that Is it right that your dad told you your mom was dead, but she wasn't?
Yeah, we were. Well, for the my mother and my father divorced when I was about 2, and they didn't think that my father was suited to actually raise a child by himself. So there was a legal battle, and where would young Cliff go? So, anyways, I ended up in an orphanage for a little while. But I mean, as it happens, both of my parents were alive. But yeah, my whole family would. They all said that that my mother had passed away, and then a friend of mine who became a milkman said that your aunt wants to talk to you. And I was about 20, I guess, or 21, and then I spoke to her, and she said, "How would you like to meet your mother?" So yeah, it's sort of it wasn't a.
Well, what's that like though when you think your mom is dead? And then you're going to meet your mom. Like, that's got to be a mind blow.
Yeah, you can let it become whatever you let it. But it was very strange. And she had her own family. And so it was, meeting her for the first time. Yeah, it was strange. And that I was on a guilt trip sort of talking to her because of my father. But then... my father, was one of them that mentioned, that she wasn't around. So at first, that she had passed away. And then it just became something that you think about completely. And then So, yes, it was difficult. And I was, once my grandmother, my father, got custody of me, then my father was a real sports fanatic. And, he pushed me into sports. And luckily, and my grandmother was a strict Scottish lady, and she had to be strict because my dad was. I mean, we had so much fun together just talking about sports and everything, and I missed the whole deal there. But he's gone now. But he would have been 100 about a year ago, I think, or so.
Okay, now. Hearing all this, it's like this is the recipe, right? This is the perfect storm that could create a Canadian World Snooker Championship winner. You did, and the alchemy was there.
Yeah, well, it was. I mean, I just had this drive that I wanted, especially for my father. I wanted, because my dad didn't have much education, and I was the, only child, and I wanted my dad and I to be recognized as sort of normal family members. Not that we were mistreated or anything, but
right.
I left school after I passed grade 9, and I think I got kicked out of 3 schools that year, like just for being a smart ass and or a ham or whatever you want to call it. And like the truant officer would come over to my place, my grandmother and dad's place, and when I was about 15, and help me help me chop wood. And he goes, "What am I doing here?" and then my teacher, who actually was a Rhodes Scholar, he on the last day of school, and I hadn't been to school a lot that year, and he said, "Right, class," he said, "everybody's passed," and the whole class all looked around at me. How could Thorburn actually pass? And he said, "Yeah, everybody passed." He said, "Have a great summer, Thorburn. You stay behind." And so I stayed behind, and he had these words of wisdom for me. He says, "Listen, you little." Right? You didn't pass. He said, "I passed you because I don't want to see you in this something school ever again." And then we had a thing about maybe 5 or 6 years later where we were raising money for the Toronto Firefighters Burn Unit, and we raised $25,000 actually for this one night that we had up at the school. And they probably had about 1,400 people there or something like that. And the teacher was there. He said, "I don't believe it." He said, "But congratulations," which was nice.
Amazing. A couple of quick notes, because I'm afraid I'll get to the end of this episode and I'll forget to ask these nice questions. But one comes from Rick A. Rick says, in a 1975 episode of King of Kensington, an episode featured a snooker match between Larry, played by Al Waxman, and Kathy, Fiona Reed, Cliff Thorburn was listed as a snooker consultant in the credits. Does Cliff have any recollection of this? And if so, any anecdotes he'd like to share? He wrote anecdotes, but that's like when you have poison and you need an anecdote. It's anecdotes. Do you remember this at all?
Yeah, I do. I do remember. Yeah, I do remember that. I mean, I was I just helped them with their bridges, etc., and also I played a few of the shots that were important.
You were the stunt man there.
Yeah, the stunt player. And that was a lot of fun. And I was a fan of the show, of course. And that's where I think it was, is it Joe Flaherty? Was it Joe Flaherty?
He's on SCTV, Joe Flaherty.
Yeah, was he not in that? Was he? I think he might have been in that particular scene. But, I got to meet him, and then I, followed his career because I was a fan of his more than the actual show.
Well, Joe Flaherty, sadly, no longer with us, but he was at the SCTV reunion that was filmed, so we will see him eventually whenever they finish making this dog. It's become quite the project, but listeners of this program know my beef with that. But we lost Joe Flaherty, sadly. He was a Pittsburgh guy.
Okay. Yeah.
But he came up here for probably for Godspell or something, but he's up here for King of Kensington. Now, DJ Dream Doctor, he wrote in, I used to play snooker at Kingsway Billiards, which is now the Crooked Q, not far from here, actually, back in the 80s. Can you ask Cliff if he ever played there? It used to be a serious snooker hall. Any Crooked Q / Kingsway Billiards memories?
Isn't that on? Is that
it's on Bloor.
Yeah.
Near Royal York, between Royal York and Islington.
Yeah, sure, yeah, and it's a wonderful place. It's one of the first places that actually, brought. Well, they had some booze, but also brought in great food, and it became more of a corporate place as well. Like to have Christmas parties and all that, and he'd hire me once. They would hire me once in a while, yeah, but not. There wasn't too much as far as top players were concerned. I didn't hear too much about it. Well, there must have been, but because if I would have had wind of anything, like if somebody gambled or something, well, then I would maybe stop by, but not hustle. I mean, I always say, well, I've never hustled anybody before, and I hope I never have to do that again.
So what's the difference? Is hustling where you pretend like you're not a great player and then you take them, or like what is the difference between hustling somebody and just like beating them for money?
If they know who you are and you don't hide the fact, right. Miss shots on purpose.
Right.
But hustling is selling an older person some product for their house that that they don't need. But I've never. But when you hustle somebody in pool, it's not. It's like karma. Something will come back and haunt you.
Okay, I'm taking notes over here. Fascinating. I'm actually looking at the live stream, and I will say there is an issue, I think a technical issue that arose last week. I have to iron out where it looks like the frame rate is lower on the live stream, so I have to figure that out. But thank you for being there. DJ Dream Doctor is actually watching us live, and he says, I remember watching Steve Davis, and he was so cool and collected. How did you, Cliff, feel about your rivalry with Steve Davis?
I knew that he was good. I guess I first saw him play about 1978, about 3 years before he won the championship for the first time, and I knew that he was going to be special. He worked very diligently at his game, and he had the best coaches, etc. And actually, we just had a champions dinner over in. First of all, I really enjoyed playing Steve. He's as hard as anybody that I actually played, and a tremendous talent. Won 40 tournaments or something, which was unheard of. But we just had a champions dinner, and for the first time, and they presented us, with velvet jackets with the crest of the World Championship trophy on it, and we had 11 or 12 people at the dinner. There's only 18 former champions, still alive. And, it went from Ray Reardon, who was a 6 times champion, 92 years old. He passed away within the last 6 months or so. And then the next lowest was Terry Griffiths. He just passed away. And then I became the oldest living world champion. Well, I'm 77. It's a big drop.
And you're not going anywhere anytime soon, not with good hair like that.
Yeah, well,
that's an indicator.
92 to 77 is a bit of a drop. So I became the oldest person. So anyways, at this dinner, like, I'll try and make this quick. We're just talking, and the former, the champion at the time, said a few words. His name's Kyron Wilson. He's English, and now it's
what a surprise!
Championship. Yeah, and the championship is just being won by a Chinese fellow, Zhao Tin. Okay,
but not a UK guy. And
no, first time China, and just a huge thing. But I just want to get back to the dinner here.
Steve Davis.
Yeah, so Kyron Wilson said a few nice words and all that stuff, and then they came to me for one reason or another, and of course I'm talking about the fact that Steve Davis was in his prime. When I was just it's my prime too, to a certain extent, and but Steve, so now it's right. So I first met him in '78. I retired in '96, so that's 18 years. And in that time, Steve and I had 2 conversations of 5 minutes or more.
Wow.
In 18 years. So then I had a chance to talk to him. I just said, well, Steve, I want to thank you for your time, in speaking to me those 2 times, and said something, which I can't say on air. That was actually quite funny. Oh no. Well, I can't do that. But okay. Well, actually, okay. What I said was that and then we met in Australia after I retired. On the main tour. So in '98 we met in Australia, and like I'm just having breakfast, and Steve was there, and so then I hear, "Hey, Cliff," and I turn around, and it's Steve Davis, and I said, "Oh, hi, Steve, how you doing?" Now, what I meant to say was, now what do you bleep want, Steve? What do you want this time? Sorry. So what, it's like 2 conversations of 5 minutes in 18
that's amazing.
years. But he would actually, he'd show up, practice, wouldn't say anything. And then after the match was over, they might, just hop into the limo and then go back to his hotel or, whatever he did at the time. And, but we never spoke hardly at all. It was just one of those things. It was like he was cocooned, or, don't speak to Thorburn.
He was in the zone, or maybe you Canadians, right? Like you're an imposter or something on his turf. But DJ Dream Doctor wants us all to know that after his snooker career, Steve Davis became a DJ. I don't know if you knew that or not. If that came up in your chat you had at that reunion there, that Steve Davis apparently became a DJ. And by the way, I think I told you off the top, I don't know this world at all, but I did a lot of homework when I knew that Gary Chowan was sending you over, and I'm like, I gotta please Gary on this. Like, I feel like Gary's gonna be listening astutely. I gotta do a good job. So I did a lot of homework, and you're dropping these names, and I'm like, I know these names. So Steve Davis, just to give people some perspective, we'll talk in a minute about the World Snooker Championship in 1980, where you win, Cliff. That's spoiler alert. But in 1983, you made the finals against Steve Davis. Steve actually beat you, but you dropped the name Terry Griffiths. And the fun fact that come out of that 83 tournament is that you became, and you're going to tell me what this means, you became the first player to make a maximum break in a world championship match. You did that in the second round against Terry Griffiths. What exactly am I talking about, Cliff?
Well, in snooker, you have, there's no numbers on the balls, but there's 15 red balls, and it's a game that was invented in 1875 in a army base in India. And so they had 15 red balls, and that game was called Pyramids. And he decided to come up with 6 more colored balls, and they are the yellow, green, brown, blue, pink, and black. And the reds are worth a point, And if you pot a red, it stays down, and then you can shoot one of the other 6 colors, and they're the points are yellow 2, green, and up to the pink, black 6 and 7 respectively. And so if you obviously if you make a red and a black, then that comes to 8 points. 1 for the red, 7 for the black. 8 times 15 is 120, and then the 6 colored balls they come to 27 points, and that makes a total 147 points, and that's the most that you can score. There is a way to score more points, but your opponent has to make a penalty. But that's another story. So it had never been done before. The first World Championship was in 1927. So for 56 years, there had never been a 147 in the World Championships, and I was the first one in 1983, and I actually fluked the first ball, to stop this fellow, from saying, "Yeah, but he fluked the first ball." Or what's his name? This fellow, the doctor, somebody.
Oh, DJ Dream Doctor.
Dream Doctor. Well, there we go.
It's a good handle, right?
Yeah. Well, I got to meet this guy. So, anyways, yeah, and then I continued on, and I cleared up and became the first person to do it in the World Championship. It's it's like the 4-minute mile, I guess you could say. I don't know.
I'm impressed, Cliff. For what it's worth, I'm sitting here thoroughly impressed.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things that somebody had to do it, and there's been that many World Championships that eventually it was going to be done, and some players have had 3 each at the World Championships, and so things have changed. There's a lot of great players out there now, the stunning players, and
sure.
Yeah, and especially this a young Chinese boy. I think mind you, he's 28 now. I think something like that. But boy, he plays beautifully. It's just so beautiful to watch.
Now you mentioned you're the first to do that. You're the first to do a few things, but one that I noticed it's got an asterisk beside it. But you're generally recognized as the first world champion who does not hail from the United Kingdom, which is an awkward way of saying you're not from the UK, you won, but there is an asterisk there. So I feel like there's like an Australian guy who won, but maybe they've removed it for some reason. I don't know if you can.
Oh, they had a let's see, they had a association that they wanted to form, all the top players, and the pro game was actually run by the Amateurs Association. It's a long story, but these things happen.
Right.
And so all of the players balked at playing in this next World Championship unless they controlled it. So there was 2 players, Horace Lindrum and Clark McConaughey. Horace Lindrum from Australia and Clark McConaughey from New Zealand, and they're both very good players, great players, and so they decided just to not go with the pros. I'm not even sure how it all worked out, but anyways, They played a match, and of course the trophy was up for grabs, and Horace Lindrum won it, and fair dinkum, as they say.
Well, we're going to put a asterisk on that for sure.
Yeah,
we'll recognize you as the sport's first world champion from outside the UK. And furthermore, Cliff, while we're tooting your horn here, you're the first non-British player to top the snooker world rankings. You were ranked number 1 during the 81 and 82 season. Of course, that's after I keep teasing this championship you win, which we're going to get to. But I'm going to ask you a couple more questions since I kind of got you hostage here. How's your Great Lakes beer, by the way?
It's fantastic. Yes,
it's fresh, brewed right here in South Etobicoke at Great Lakes Brewery, and they hosted us. Just last week, we all got together, by us, I mean the listenership. We got together at Great Lakes Brewery for TMLX 19, and everyone had a great time, and the food was delicious. Palma Pasta fed everybody. Cliff, how would you like, I mean, this is not as exciting as being the first champion from outside the UK, but how would you like a large lasagna? Do you like lasagna? I
sure do.
Okay, yeah. I have in my freezer for you from Palma Pasta. Everybody go to palmapasta.com. They're in Mississauga and Oakville. They've sent Cliff over a lasagna, and it's yours to take home with you, Cliff.
Love it. Yeah, sure. Would love that.
Have you ever been to a Toronto Maple Leafs baseball game at Christie Pitts?
No, I haven't. I've always wanted to go, actually, because I know that there's a long history. And,
Okay, you know your stuff. You want to
I
learn
know
about that
I know
history?
the baseball. Yeah, well, I see the book here, too. Yes.
That's yours, Cliff. That's the
Yeah,
history of
course. Oh,
Toronto
that's
Maple Leafs
great.
baseball.
Yeah.
Just, you know what? The ticket will cost you absolutely nothing. It's just the best vibe, the best atmosphere, high quality semi-pro baseball. And you can get yourself a hot dog and get yourself a lager and just sit on the hill and enjoy Toronto Maple Leafs baseball.
I will show up there one night with my family.
Oh, amazing. That'd be amazing. That book is yours to take home. I want to shout out Ridley Funeral Home. We're actually going to record a new episode later today of Life's Undertaking with Brad Jones. But Ridley Funeral Home has sent over a measuring tape. If you need to measure, I don't know if you need to measure something on the billiard table. What do I know?
This is starting to get a bit personal now.
I won't
with
ask
them
what you
giving me
measure.
a tape measure. I'm not.
No, I've seen your hair, Cliff.
You've got me mixed up with somebody who cares. Holy smokes! I don't know. I don't mind the tape measure, but for all the wrong reasons here. That I'm still here for one thing.
Well, you're not just here, but you know me. I have a dare I toot my own horn here and tell you, I think I have a pretty good head of hair. Okay, so game recognizes game. Like if you're, I don't know, if you're a particularly tall person and you meet another tall person, you're like, okay, game recognizing game. I'm looking at that head of hair. If I could have that head of hair when I'm your age, that would be like my wish. So I don't think you're anywhere close to visiting Ridley Funeral Home, is what I'm telling you.
Well, I don't know if that's a fair assumption as far as if you're not well, there's a lot of.
I feel like
people
sickly
out
people
there.
don't have great head of hair like that. But you're right, I'm not a doctor, so I could be.
I want to stay away from that conversation. Absolutely, totally.
Okay, we're gonna move on then. I want to welcome a brand new sponsor. It's the Waterfront BIA. And I think what I'll do is throughout the summer when I talk about all the amazing events at the waterfront, I bike the waterfront trail like almost every day. I love what's happening at the waterfront. In fact, there's a Great Lakes brew pub at Jarvis and Queens Quay where we'll probably have our next TMLX event. And that's not on the waterfront. So from July 4th to the 6th, that's only in a few days, experience the vibrant heart of the Philippines at the Fun Philippines Toronto Food and Music Festival. It's a mouthful, but it's called the Fun Philippines Toronto Food and Music Festival. It's happening July 4th to the 6th. Enjoy live performances by Filipino artists, feast on authentic Filipino foods, and discover artisanal and indigenous-made craft exhibits. So go to waterfrontbia.com to get more info, but it's happening July 4 to 6. Put it in your calendar. Have you ever been to the Philippines, Cliff?
No, I haven't. And there's some great pool players down there. I don't know if there's a world-class snooker player come from there. I think it's mainly because they're all playing pool, but there's they're just wonderfully skilled players and youngsters as well that can beat anybody.
Okay, now Scott Dobson, who's been on the program, he said, Cliff is a very interesting guy. Scott, I'm now here to tell you, now that we're almost an hour into this thing, I think you're absolutely right. Very interesting guy. Ask him if he liked Gods of Snooker. Did you like Gods of Snooker? Do you know what that is? Is that a book?
No, I think it was a program with one or two episodes. No, I didn't see it though.
Okay, I haven't seen it either.
Well, I know the ending, so.
Moose Grumpy says, I used to watch him all the time with my stepfather when I was young. He's 100% the best player not from the UK. So two things I have to follow up. Thank you, Moose, for that. But one is, do you think you're the best snooker player ever who's not from the UK? And then the follow-up is, do you get like ticked off when people throw like a condition on it? Like, oh, Cliff, he's the best. Of all the players not from the UK. Like it's almost like a lawyer wrote it and they put an asterisk in there. So do you think you're the best player not from the UK, or do you think you're the best player, period?
Oh, no. The game has changed, and it's like they're playing snooker as if it's being played on a much smaller table. That's how well that they're playing, and they're, if you're not practicing, they are kind of a situation, and a lot of the players are Chinese, but no, the best overseas players probably from Australia now. Neil Robertson, and his father had a club he started playing when he was very very young and probably, helped along a little bit. But boy, what a wonderful player. And then we had the Chinese players, and there's been, and even a couple of players from Canada here that didn't, that maybe should have gone on to win. Like Alain Robidoux is a wonderful player from Montreal, but he's retired. He should have. We won a World Team Championship together, and that's always satisfying, beating everybody.
Sure.
In a team match, but Bob Chaperon, Kirk Stevens, we've had some truly wonderful players, and maybe didn't, they were good enough to win the championship, but never thought they were.
Okay, fascinating. By the way, when Moose Grumpy talked about watching you on CBC, Carlo chimed in to say he remembers seeing you on Saturday mid-afternoon. So can you remind me, was there a program on CBC Saturday afternoons where they would show snooker matches?
Yeah, that was when there was a lot of Canadian content, and of course you'd have somebody like the great Ted Reynolds was a great sportscaster. And Ted was from BC, I think. But anyways, he would come over with the director, Lawrence Kimber, and they'd spend 2 weekends at the World Championship and send back 3 or 4 really good reports. And of course, the Canadian players were doing well, and so every match that they showed, or every second match, it was there was normally at least one Canadian playing. So it was, that was on a Saturday afternoon, and it was very popular too.
Sure. Well, that would draw in casual fans who would discover the sport essentially. And I feel like today, I don't know how a casual fan gets drawn in. Like you would have to purposefully look for it. It wouldn't just ever accidentally hit you.
Yeah, there's nothing on, there's nothing on live TV. I mean, obviously in the UK there is, but there's lots and lots of stuff online. But the BBC, they cover 3 tournaments. But the World Snooker Championship is probably 100. It's on for 17 days, and they probably have 130, 135 hours of live snooker on. It's either BBC One or BBC Two, sure. And then there's and then Eurosport, even though BBC is doing it, well, they get like a spin-off from it as well. So they have their own commentators booth there as well. So for the last the semis and the final. So it's all over Europe. People in France and Belgium and the Netherlands are all big time fans, and now because of that, there's the world champion from about 3 years ago was a Belgium lad. He was very, very young and just a really strong player. He went out and bought himself a Ferrari anyways when he won it.
What did you buy when you won it? We're gonna get to we're gonna get to the big win in a moment, but what did you buy when you won in 1980? I can't remember. I was driving a nice car and, had my... What did you drive?
A Cadillac. Yeah.
I see you in a Cadillac.
Yeah, and over in the UK, I was driving a Mercedes. It was just like a 380 SE, but it was a coupe, and it was a great highway car. And then all of a sudden, we had some kids and, downsized a little bit. But yeah, they
didn't make you get a caravan or anything, did they?
No, but one of the snooker players, Bill Werbenek, one of our truly great players, Bill was renowned for his, drinking exploits, and the fact that he'd actually have a pint or two when he played, but also, but he would have actually he bought a caravan, and of course he had the taps and everything in it. And but Bill was actually a very, very good, a very good player, and actually. He made a 143. Before I made the 147, Bill made a 143 to tie the highest break record in the history of the World Championships. And also Kirk Stevens had the 147 at the Benson Hedges tournament, which is the second biggest tournament, is what they say. And Donald Sutherland actually was there, watching. He just sort of came to the tournament, which was in London at the Wembley Conference Center, and he was staying at the St. James Club, and he heard that a Canadian player was playing, so he showed up, and we sort of met him, and I was speaking to him and Kirk before his match, and so Donald said, well, I'd like to go in and watch. So he hadn't seen a snooker frame in his life, and he walked in, and there's Kirk playing. He's got a white suit on, and he made a 1-4-7 break, and there's 2,800 people watching. It was like the people went crazy, and then he left. He had to go somewhere, so he just sort of went in, watched one frame, watched clear, Kirk make a 1-4-7 break and leave, and then he got up and left because he had to go somewhere.
Oh my God, that's like you've been to one baseball game in your life and you saw a perfect game or something like that, and then you just assume it's always like that.
Yeah, or just the overtime goal or something.
Oh yeah. I went to one game and then I watched, or I was going to say Sidney Crosby scored the golden goal there, and you just it's always like that. That's how the sport works. That's funny. That's a great Donald Sutherland story. All right, Emily Muse. This one's fun. I thought this was a fun one. This came in from Emily Muse, and Emily says, I threw Cliff out of a chair once. It was November 3rd, 1995, and he was courtside at a Toronto Raptors game, and I was a Toronto Raptors dancer, and he was in our way to get on the court. And I said, pardon my French, Cliff, I know you're a proper gentleman, but I'm quoting Emily here. I said, fuck it, and tossed him. I apologized afterwards, but it was wild, and this was just days before I licked Dennis Rodman's abs. So there's quite a note that came in from Emily Muse. You have any memory of a dancer moving you out of the way in early? By the way, this is very, very early times for the Raptors. They only started playing in the fall of '95.
Yeah, I went to a Toronto Raptors night, and I was doing some trick shots, and that was Damon Stoudemire was there. He was
the rookie.
The rookie, and but I can't remember getting tossed.
Maybe moved you aside. Who knows?
Well, I do remember. Right, they said that they'd pay me at the time, like they'd pay me in Raptors tickets. So I said, okay, great, and courtside tickets, and I ended up getting that time. I ended up getting for $550 was 2 tickets courtside.
Well, that's a good old days. But we should remember though, if it's November '95, they're playing at the Dome. They have, because the Air Canada Centre doesn't open till '99. So,
was it?
Yeah, like I can tell you as a Raptors fan that we played those first 4 years or whatever at the Sky Dome. Like, so you would have been doing that in the cavernous Sky Dome, I would think. Yeah.
Well, actually, all that I know is that I gave my kids the 2 tickets, and I just drove around town for a while, like to pick them up. That's basically what happened. But anyways, wonderful franchise, and has done so much for.
And like they're
the city
champions
and the country. Yeah, that's great.
You both climbed the mountains here. By the way, Damon Stoudemire's nickname was Mighty Mouse, and your nickname was the Grinder. How do you feel about that nickname, the Grinder, and how the heck did you get that nickname?
Well, I think the Grinder sort of sounds like to kids. It sounds a little scary, to be honest with you.
Well, I was going to say it sounds like you're in adult films. The Grinder.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean that actually, but like a meat
grinder or some kind of.
No, but I did hear about that. Yeah, that's I did hear about that, but because I say to kids sometimes, son of Grinder, if the fellow's a good safety player, but. Actually, somebody called me the Grindfather, which I thought was
that's
nice.
good.
But there's a few people like that have got like in basketball and baseball and stuff going around. But the Grinder came from an announcer that just after I beat Alex Higgins in the final, he said to Higgins, he said, or to Alex, I should say, he's a real grinder, isn't he? And then. Alex said something like, he grinds real hard, believe me, something like that. But it was a sports announcer, David Vine, that actually did the skiing at the BBC, and then he'd come straight from Kitzbühel to do the World Championships, in the middle of April. So he had some good stories as well.
All right, so you've said the name Alex Higgins now, and I feel like we've teased this long enough. We should kind of get into it here. But it is 1980. It is the World Snooker Championship in 1980. You defeat Alex Higgins 18-16 in the final. What do you remember about that moment for you, Cliff?
Well, Alex and I weren't talking. It's a long story. We just always had if I won, there was some kind of argument, let's say, but he was a wonderful player and just had to win. But I mean, so did I. So anyways, we were locked in at 16 all or 16-15, and then I missed an easy shot, and appeared to be an easy shot, but I made a problem out of it, and so he won that. The crowd went crazy, and then as I was walking off, it's the first one to win 18, so now it'd be best of three, and there is 3 or 4 guys there with Alex Higgins T-shirts on and stuff. The place is packed, and that was the night of the Iranian embassy siege.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So that was the same night, and that's when they went straight to the embassy siege and took the snooker off, and everybody. Well, there was a lot of like a big turmoil about that. So anyways, it's the first time that snooker went to BBC Two, and so they went to BBC Two, and Kate Eady, I think, was the like the rookie newscaster that was actually on there, that the only one that was there doing the embassy, because they were waiting for something to happen. But anyways, so I ended up going back to my dressing room after missing this shot, and I'm screaming at myself in my dressing room. I just, oh my God, purple face kind of a thing. And then I came back out, and then I cleared the table, and then I had I didn't miss a shot in the last game as well, like to win 18-16. So that was, I couldn't possibly have played better, but they don't they don't rank that as one of the, great performances. Listen, right? I'm not worried about it, but I mean, I'm here talking, right? I guess that's why nobody gives me a microphone anymore.
Well, that's exactly why I gave you a microphone. You want your proper flowers here. That's a significant victory in 1980.
Well, it was it was the best that I could possibly do, and it was a dream for everybody that was a friend of mine or a fan or a Canadian or anybody that's ever picked up a snooker cue over here. But yeah, I did it, and taking the trophy. Well, that's what the fellow said. Taking it across the oceans now, and of course, that must have hurt a little bit. But I mean, I carried this Jeroboam of champagne all the way across to our my wife Barbara and I. Like, we had an apartment then. And I just, and we took it out on the balcony, and the cork went so far, because we were just like lugging it around for about a month almost.
Wow.
But anyways, yeah, just great moments. I have to, I have a story about getting like the Order of Canada, which I'd actually like to tell at some point, and just one other story about. What can happen if you're not recognized.
I had a section here where we talk about some of the honors bestowed upon you, and there will be absolutely an Order of Canada chance to tell that story, which I really, really do want, actually. I think we'll close with all the accolades, because I think this is highly significant. You mentioned Alex Higgins, and you had a adversarial I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I did read a quote from Alex where... And he's no longer with us, Alex Higgins. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. But he said, and I won't say this, he said, "You're a Canadian C-word." But he didn't say C-word. He said a C-word. Okay. "You're a Canadian C-word who is shit at snooker." This is a quote as he refers to you, Cliff. That must have fired you up.
Yeah, that was, well, I mean, I think the thing that hurt me the most was that not hurt me, that peeved me off the most was, the fact that he said that I couldn't play snooker. I mean, we've all been called,
Jeez.
Right, whatever. But I mean, that was that. Yeah, and actually, we had a bit of a commotion after he said that too. So,
But did it ever come to fisticuffs, or is there a code here?
Yeah, no. There was, he was smaller than me, but you can't persist in saying something to somebody, and like especially saying the nationalities and all that stuff.
Yeah, listen, you can't criticize Cliff for two things, okay? You can't criticize him for his snooker playing ability, and you can't criticize him for his hair. Those are two things that just,
There, yeah.
Well, Gary Chowan told me to mention hair as many times as I could.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Gary.
You know what? He should change his name to Harry.
No,
Harry
but
Chowan.
Gary gives a very good haircut. Of course he does. Yeah,
Well, just ask Cher. She'll tell you.
He's a legend. Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's a legend.
Yeah, I love Gary.
You're a legend here. I'm going to shout out two more partners, and then I'm going to ask the Gare Joyce questions, and then we're going to talk about you being made an order. The way to say it properly. I took notes on this. You were made a member of the Order of Canada in 1984. But first, I'm going to thank Nick Iones for stepping up to help fuel the real talk so I can have conversations like that with Cliff. Nick has a great podcast called it's called Building Toronto Skyline. Here, I've been drinking too much beer. Building Toronto Skyline, and he's got another podcast called Building Success. And we hope to see Nick at TMLX 20 at the GLB Brew Pub. I'll announce that date shortly, so you guys can put it in your calendar. It'll be capped at 40 attendees, so be ready for that announcement. I also want to thank recyclemyelectronics.ca, because if you have old cables, old devices, old electronics, don't throw it in the garbage, because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and find out where you should drop it off to be properly recycled. And here are the Gare Joyce questions, and then we're going to talk about you being made a member of the Order of Canada. I think that is amazing. So, Gare Joyce, and this is going to take a bit here, but Gare is a fantastic sports writer, and he knows his stuff. And he says, please ask Cliff about Detroit Red.
Cornbread Red. Yeah.
Okay, that's corn. Okay, so he just wrote Detroit Red. I'm flying blind here, but
yeah, the same thing. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So what am I talking about here? Like is this a person? Like, what is Detroit Red? What is Cornbread Red?
Well, Cornbread Red is actually they did a 9-10 page feature in Playboy magazine in probably the mid 80s, something like that, or no, actually maybe the mid 70s, and as far as I know, all of it was true. But I ended up playing a money match with Cornbread Red in Detroit, and this was a pool room way down the end of Michigan Avenue.
Okay.
And not the best part of town then. I don't know what it's like now. But anyways, and we were losing money at first because of the balls were a different size. It's not and we were getting quite low on money. And the fellow that was backing him, I think that he was a drug dealer, because they had this was the year, this was 2 weeks before I won my first Canadian championship in 1974, and I'd been a pro for 2 years, so that's how far that Canada was behind as far as being organized. But now we've had 51 or 52 championships from the same the organization. But anyways, so we're playing, and this fellow that was backing Cornbread Red, everybody had a backer then. He had a jacket that was by the washroom or the toilet door, we'll say, like a salon kind of a door,
okay,
right?
Yep.
And one half of it was hanging, right? And he had a leather jacket there, so somebody would give him some money, and then he'd go over and he'd put his hand in the pocket and grab the stuff. I didn't see, all of that stuff. But anyways, at the end, apparently that's what it was, and I realized that it was true. But anyways, so now I started to come back, and we were playing like $500 a game at the time. It was like a lot of money at the time.
Sure.
And then so I started to play well, and then this fella, the drug dealer, said, He said, I deal and it starts with a P, U, SS, okay?
Yes.
And dead bodies, he said.
Okay.
And he said, ain't nobody left this place with the rooster's money. Now, the rooster, cornbread red, like he had this big mane of red hair,
Okay.
that sort of flowed down his back a little bit, like way below his neck.
Right.
But anyways, and I end up getting the money, and we had to be, escorted out of the place safely, so that we get into a car.
Oh my God.
And then drive off. And then I won my first Canadian championship after that. So, I was still around things like that. And there's other things like, guns and all that stuff. Wasn't, it just the wrong place at the, as far as storytelling time, at the right time. But I mean, wrong place at the wrong time, to be honest with you.
Just last week, I had Rick Vive on this program. Love talking to Rick Vive. First 50-goal scorer in Toronto Maple Leafs history. He did it 3 times. Gare says, can you ask Cliff about smoking Rick Vive in golf? And then Gare goes on to say, years ago, it was the basis of a story I edited by a writer named John Doig, a dried-up cigarette filter of a man who managed to suck all the fun out of what had to be more fun than it appeared on the written page. So is this right? This is golf? You're a good golfer?
Oh, not a bad golf. I think Rick's...
You beat Rick.
Well, Rick was a better golfer than me at one time. I think, what's Rick now? 60, 65 or something?
Around there. Still, I mean, that day I was chatting with him, he was golfing in the Joe Carter Classic.
Oh, yeah. Well, Rick, he's a very good golfer. But anyways, smoking him, I can't remember... Right. I can't remember that, but I always enjoyed seeing Rick. He was always smartly dressed, and he'd have like 2 or 3 outfits for the day, kind of a thing. He always sort of, even here, like if he walked in here, right, he probably, like you saw him out by the car, he went to the washroom with a duffel bag or something, and then he came out with a different outfit.
Well, he's a good-looking guy, right?
Oh, yeah,
Still a good-looking
guy. No, I'm not knocking the guy,
right.
But he dressed well and was a terrific socializer and a hell of a hockey player. Just played for the wrong team. That's all.
Well, listen, do you have any Harold Ballard stories for me, or?
No,
Harold Ballard story. Okay. Well, just thinking of that story. Gare believes you'll answer the name Kirk Stevens to this question, but he wants me to ask you, who is the most talented kid ever? And he says he has to say Kirk Stevens. Now, no one tells Cliff what to say, but do you agree with this assessment from Gare?
Is this Gary Chowan?
No, this is Gare Joyce.
Oh, Gare Joyce. Okay. Kirk was, well, like I said about the Canadian players, I mean, right. Kirk was a prodigy, that's for sure. And I won 4 straight Canadian championships from the age of 26 to 29, I guess, and 74, 5, 6, 7. And then Kirk came and played in his first one and beat me in the semifinals, which had stopped my run, and then went on to win the final. And then he turned pro, and he was very, very young. And Kirk was, he was very young. And I remember Kirk, when I first started playing here in Toronto, getting paid to play in a room back in the early 70s. Kirk said, well, I'll play you a game. And he was like 14 or something, or 15. Wow. And I said, well, I don't. No, he said, I want to play you for the $2 or whatever it was.
Right.
And I said, yeah, sure. So anyways, I won. And then he went to pay me with this, I don't know where the money had been. I mean, it was like,
And you said, keep it.
Well, yeah, I said that, but the money itself, it's like one of those things, like when you're in school, like you got one of those, straw things, now you go like this, and it gets stuck on the ceiling.
Spitballs,
like one of those things. And I sort of had to pick it up with my thumb and forefinger just to have a look and see if it was what it was. I said, no, right, you don't have to pay me. No, right, I've got to pay you. And so like 4 years later, he beat me for the Canadian Championship. And then he went to the UK and should have won this and should have won that, but he made this 147. If you look up Kirk Stevens, white suit, Benson Hedges, you'll see, and just what all the raging was about, and like 2,800 people there, And it was just fantastic. He was good enough to win the championship. Got to another semifinal 2 or 3 years later, and then sort of stopped playing about 86 or 87, something like that. But genuine, he was the real deal.
The real deal here. You're the real deal, Cliff. You were inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame in 2001. You were inducted into the Snooker Hall of Fame in 2014. You, let me hear it from you, but the BC Sports Hall of Fame in 1995, of course. You hail from Victoria. You're in the BC Sports Hall of Fame. But please, in 1984, you were made a member of the Order of Canada. How did you feel about that? Tell me about that.
Well, that was, I was, told by a great friend of mine. His name was George Crum. He was the musical director of the National Ballet, and George was somebody that conducted Nureyev and Fontaine and Baryshnikov, did all the music. And then he retired, and then he opened up a pool room at Young and Steele's and started making hot dogs for the boys, and loved that. And he became a great friend of mine. But anyways, he was one of the people that put my name forward, one of the right people, obviously. And I was accepted as, to be a recipient of the Order of Canada. So my wife Barbara and I went up to Ottawa, and I remember, just being in the I guess there was 40 or 50 of us in the Governor General's home at Rideau Hall, right. And and we all sort of had to be shunted. You know what I mean? Okay, you get up and then everybody moves down, and but you became the, So I'm saying to myself, okay, right, just make sure that you do your jacket up when your name comes up. So, anyways, and I've got pictures, wonderful pictures, and so my name comes up, and I stand up, and I boom, they start walking. Well, my jacket's wide open, like I'm at St. Andrews, just walking down the fairway with the wind blowing back. Anyways, I got up there, and I could see the Roland Minchiner was there, and he was I could see him looking at me like, who's this guy? And anyways, so but that's great and everything. And I saw that. In fact, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was actually there. He was just sort of over in the corner. He was the prime minister at the time, just sort of over in the corner, and he sort of had his, legs sort of crossed, leaning up against a wall. I thought, well, this is neat. Anyways, I go back, and we're having dinner, and then this fellow comes up and says, Mr. and Mrs. Thorburn, His Excellency would like you to, come back and have a drink in his private quarters, because Ed Schreier did say to me when he's putting my a medal on, he said, Cliff, my high run is 68. Is that good? I said, yes, sir, that is. Well, now I've got a friend in the place, and I'm, oh, my God. And, but people don't know that, he's my buddy now, at the table. So I'm with about, I think there's 4 other couples. So anyways, so he comes over and says, I said, yeah, sure, lovely. And, so now we get up, and then we end up going to his private quarters. And, of course, I walk in, and Mr. Schreier's got his jacket off, and there's a snooker table there. So this is, 84. The balls are, it's not, it hasn't been taken care of kind of a thing. And he wants to have a couple of shots with the pitcher or whatever, or show him some shots, and it's great. I can't believe it. So it's fabulous. So anyways, I'm looking at the table, and now there's a rip in the table. There's what can happen? Like when you rip a cloth, it's not just like a little hole appears. It is a thing. It's sort of like it's, the nap is, or the cloth is that fine that now you sort of, you make the rip, and the rip actually turns into an L, or half a square kind of thing, or 2/3 of a square, or, third of a square. Like this, and then there's a flap, you see. Well, this is an awfully big flap. This is I could actually pick up the pointed bit and lift it up a foot.
Wow.
That's how big it is.
Wow.
So I said,
That's big.
My God, sir, this is, Mr. Schreier, this is, this is a big rip, thinking about, maybe having some fun with him. He said, yeah. He said 2 weeks ago. I said, what happened? He said, Justin Trudeau. So I didn't know Justin or hear about him at all. But
just a kid.
Well, I'm going to, because he's probably, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 or something. But I wanted, I want to meet him just for that fact alone, just to say, how's your snooker or your pool?
That's a fantastic. I was wondering what the kicker was going to be. That's great. Future Prime Minister Justin Trudeau rip the table. That's amazing. So, when you were inducted in '84? By the way, and I find it interesting. You're inducted in your prime essentially because you win that championship in 1980, but you're winning invitational masters in '83, '85. 86. You were the first player to win that tournament 3 times and the first to retain the title. So in 1984, you're still in your prime. I think people like Donovan Bailey, they make them wait. You were in your prime in 96, Mr. Bailey, but in a couple of decades you can pick up your Order of Canada.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened. I think it certainly might have something to do with the fact that I was like a nice acquaintance of Mr. Roy McMurtry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and all the people at Canada House,
sure.
And his fellow Michael Phillips, who was the ambassador to Sweden and Ireland, a real fine friend of mine that passed away a couple of years ago. And just, having friends in the UK, it was a different thing. I really think that they just wanted to, get the highlight of the snooker, that this guy's doing something and that, that might be a little bit different. And
well, you're representing Canada on the world stage and you're wonderfully.
Well, Donovan Bailey did a pretty good job too, didn't he?
That's right. But he was, they made him wait. Bruni Surin got the Order of Canada before Donovan, and Donovan took note of that. So,
did you say that? Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, you took note of that. But Donovan won the double gold. Bruni won one of those golds with the 4x100 in 96 in Atlanta. But Donovan won the 100 meters. He was the fastest man in the world. And I got to say, you're my first professional snooker guest, and I learned so much, and I love these convos. So I really appreciate you stopping by, Cliff.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, good fun.
I'll have to give Gary Chowan a thumbs up that he delivered. He said, he's going to be great. And I said, let's find out, Gary. And you were great. So thanks so much. I didn't leave anything on the floor here that you wanted to talk about, right? Was there anything specific you wanted to mention before I read the outro?
Well, the one thing about coming back to North America, and a bunch of us went down to Rochester to play in a pool tournament, and so it's a Saturday morning, and this fella comes up to us and said, "Are you guys from Canada?" And I said, "Yes, we are." He said, "Tell me, is it that world champion? You guys got a world champion snooker player, a Cliff somebody playing here?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Here in our pool tournament?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I heard that he's a really good 9-ball player." And it's like, he's talking to me. And I said, "Yes, well, he is. He's very good." He said, "Well, you must know him." And I said, well, I do. He said, "Well, how well do you know him?" And I said, well enough to sleep with his wife once in a while." So I had to tell you that because that's a true story.
Oh, that's great. And what a great line to pull out of your back pocket there. This was amazing. We're going to take a photo by Toronto Tree. I'm going to get your lasagna. You've got some fresh beer from Great Lakes to take home with you, Cliff. Thanks again for doing this. And that brings us to the end of our 1,722nd show. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Much love to all who made this possible. Again, that's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, Toronto's Waterfront BIA, Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball, RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Building Toronto Skyline, and Redley Funeral Home. See you all. How quickly can I call up a calendar here? I can't believe I don't have it loaded up already. See you all tomorrow when my special guest is, oh my goodness, it's Friday with Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun. Have you ever met Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun?
No, I haven't, but I've read his stuff. Yeah, it's terrific.
I'm going to ask Steve Simmons on Friday. He's here at 1 o'clock. I'm going to ask him why he doesn't write more about snooker. See you all then.